Hi everyone, my name is Carol Whitmarsh-Moon and I am working on my final project for professional ethics. I really didn't think I would enjoy this class as much as I have. I've learned a lot about myself, about my classmates, and about my job, honestly, and the people that I work with and how they approach problems in different ways. I strongly recommend this class to anyone that has never taken it. Somehow, through several other degrees, I've never taken an ethics class, and I strongly enjoy it. So the case we have today is a case that I learned about last year, and I found it really interesting. So I hope you find it interesting as well. This refresher probably isn't needed, but I wanted to talk about the five ethical theories that we're going to discuss as we review this case. And so I thought a refresher would be great as an understanding of how I approached looking at how the actors made their decisions in this case. So with utilitarianism, a branch of teleology, we learned about it as a consequentialist theory that holds that the most ethical choice is the one that produces the greatest number of good for the greatest number of people. So the most ethical choice is always the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. It focuses on outcomes. It aims to maximize overall happiness and minimize harm or minimize harm. Famous utilitarians include John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Deontology as a duty-based theory that asserts actions are ethical if they follow universal moral rules regardless of the consequences. It emphasizes respect for human dignity, individual rights, and treating others as ends in themselves, not as means. So famous deontologists include Immanuel Kant and W.D. Rawls. Feminist ethics, which I found absolutely fascinating when we studied it, centers on the importance of relationships, empathy, and care in ethical decision making. It critiques traditional theories such as the theory of justice for ignoring lived experiences and context of situations, and prioritizes responsiveness to human vulnerability and context. Carol Gilligan is credited for the roots of this theory. Virtue ethics focuses on the moral character of the individual rather than specific actions. An ethical decision is one made by a person who embodies virtues like honesty, courage, justice, and compassion. Aristotle and Plato are credited with beginning virtue ethics. And finally, dialogical ethics emphasizes open, honest, and respectful communication as the foundation for ethical understanding. It holds that moral truth emerges through dialogue and mutual recognition between individuals. Now that I explained how I approached using the ethical theories to discuss this case, I wanted to introduce the case itself. The communication ethical dilemma I chose is the Piccolo versus Disney case. This case centers around a couple visiting Disney World and eating at one of the property restaurants. Dr. Kanakaporn Tanswan, an emergency room physician, let the waiter know at this restaurant at the Disney Springs Resort that she had severe food allergies, and the waiter assured that they are used to taking care of, special requests. And when he brought her food, she reminded him of the severe allergies and wanted to verify her order was correct. The waiter verified the order. But something went terribly wrong with the food preparation. After a few bites, Dr. Tangswan went into anaphylactic shock and died a few minutes later. Her husband, Jeffrey Piccolo, sued Disney for the wrongful death of his wife. Disney took him to court to refute the lawsuit, saying that Piccolo did not have the right to sue due to their arbitration clause in their terms and conditions he had signed in 2019 when he signed up for a Disney Plus streaming trial. The court agreed with Disney, and they dismissed the wrongful death lawsuit. So the ethical dilemma I want to review is, should Disney have used its digital streaming agreement to limit liability for physical harm in a completely separate context from digital streaming? I identified 5 main ethical actors in this case study. Walt Disney Company, whose main role was to avoid negative press and maintain their family-friendly public image. The Disney legal team, whose role is it to protect the Disney stakeholders' interests. Jeffrey Piccolo, who lost his wife in a very tragic way that he felt should have been preventable, and he wanted justice and accountability. The presiding judge in the case, who is required to apply the law objectively and fairly. And finally, advocacy groups who wanted to raise awareness for allergy issues and ensure corporate responsibility in these types of cases. We're going to look at each of these actors one by one. So let's start applying our 5 chosen ethical theories to see how each actor behaved in this case, and if our theorists would have agreed they acted ethically. First, let's take a look at the Disney company, whose dilemma is, should they use arbitration clauses to avoid negative publicity the case would bring if played out in open court? So what are some of their options? So they can continue what they're doing with sweeping arbitration clause to limit negative publicity. They could limit arbitration to non-injury cases. They could acknowledge their role in the tragedy and take accountability even though they are not legally required to. And they could even go one step further to set a new ethical precedent by voluntarily waiving the arbitration in injury or death cases. What was their decision? They decided to go to court to have the lawsuit dismissed and to continue with arbitration. So how does the Disney decision align with each ethical theory? It does align with utilitarianism in the sense that by having the case dismissed, they did protect their interests. But for those harmed after the decision was made, the greater good for those that may suffer an injury in the future are not served. So it's a mixed review for utilitarianism. In deontology, Dr. Tang Sung was treated as a means, and Disney violated their duty to be fair and transparent. So it fails deontology. In feminist ethics, Disney ignores care and empathy in their response, especially in the context of the situation. And in virtue ethics, Disney failed to show moral courage, compassion, and justice. And finally, in dialogical ethics, Disney avoided honest and transparent engagement with Piccolo and the public. So overall, you can see the record below. So if we summarize the Disney company's ethical actions, did they make the correct decision? In my opinion, no. They acted in their own legal and financial interest and not of their public. They violated their public's trust and actually damaged their own brand in the process. So positive ramifications from Disney's point of view is they protected their stakeholders' interest and they reinforced legal consistency across any case brought against Disney. A positive ramification as well, but not necessarily for Disney, is this may prompt legislative scrutiny around forced arbitration. Negative ramifications are mainly around the reputation. They were swift and severe with the public when they perceived Disney as choosing legal loopholes over human life and accountability. You may wonder why I split Disney company from Disney's legal team, and the reason why is I chose Disney, the company itself, as more of a representation of the values they exude, and Disney more as the Disney legal team is more of ensuring stakeholder interests were met. So while Disney's legal team objectives closely align with the company itself, they are different enough and worth mentioning. So their dilemma revolves more around drafting user agreements and placing them in terms and conditions to protect from future liability. And unfortunately, they do this in a way that the situations don't even relate to each other. So that's the actual dilemma. Should they be able to do this? Should they be able to put terms and conditions of arbitration in a streaming agreement and have it relate to a wrongful death suit? So what are some of their options? They could have chosen not to take Piccolo to court to have the case dismissed and waive arbitration due to the severity of the case. And they also could have negotiated a settlement more in proportion to the incident. And finally, they could be more forthright in their agreements and exclude arbitration clauses for physical harm entirely. Their final decision was to proceed to court to make sure the arbitration agreement was upheld. For time's sake, I won't go through each of these, but you'll see they do not align well with our ethical theories, similar to the company itself. They did, as with the company, corporate interests were protected. They tried to seek brand reputation to ensure that did not suffer. But the public, when they found out about this case, pretty much saw that Piccolo was being treated as a means to an end to make sure the arbitration was held in place, and they were seen, they were seen as chasing corporate greed over empathy for the situation and avoiding all responsibility and accountability. So, in summary, I would argue they did not make the ethical choice. They prioritized risk management over moral accountability in a case involving a loss of life. Positive ramifications include executing their role well, keeping Disney from litigation and strengthening their contractual defenses. But the negative ramifications include damage to Disney's reputation, and they were seen as manipulative and unsympathetic and contributing to the already public perception of corporate greed. And they denied justice and emotional closure to Piccolo himself. The next actor I want to look at is Jeffrey Piccolo, who is the spouse of Dr. Tangsen, who lost her life in this incident. So he went through a tragic loss and was forced to decide whether he wanted to pursue justice for his wife and accountability from Disney by pursuing legal action or accept arbitration. So his dilemma was, should he move forward with the lawsuit? His options included, accepting the arbitration and moving on, or take the case to court. He also had to choose if he wanted to engage media and advocacy groups to ensure his wife's death was not in vain. He chose to take a moral stand and sue Disney for accountability. So if we look at, this in an ethical review, did his actions align with our ethical theories? Yes, by promoting for better legal practices and consumer protection, these both align with the greater good emphasis of utilitarianism. He also upholds his duty to seek justice for his wife, aligning with deontology. Piccolo's actions show love, care, and responsibility for both his wife and others who suffer from severe allergies. And so this aligns well with feminist ethics. He reflects courage and integrity from virtue ethics and seeks accountability and transparency through honest engagement with dialogical ethics. So overall, he aligns very well with all our theorists. So did Piccolo make the most ethical choice? Yes. From every ethical framework, his actions were morally grounded as he pursued a path of justice and accountability. Positive ramifications from his legal pursuit include drawing national attention to the ethical failures of corporate arbitration and increased allergy awareness, prompting both legal reform and consumer protection actions. He also felt he did everything he could to pursue justice for his wife. Negative ramifications were emotional and financial, as he did not get the result he was seeking as the case was dismissed. The next ethical actor in this case is the judge. The judge's dilemma in this case was to uphold the law which legally made the arbitration clause the legal choice, even though it may have been questionably ethical. Her options included upholding the clause as legally valid, questioning the scope of the clause and ruling it invalid, or encouraging mediation offering moral guidance. In rendering her opinion, she also could have critiqued the forced use of arbitration in unrelated situations. But the judge decided in the end to uphold the arbitration clause and dismiss the wrongful death suit. So were the judge's actions ethical? So the judge's results were mixed when we applied the ethical theories. From a utilitarian and virtue ethics standpoint, she did what was required of her by law, enforcing the contract. By doing this, she limited fallout from those that could possibly later try and challenge similar rulings. So from both theories above, I would argue the ruling felt unjust and she lacked the moral courage to challenge the law and render a different decision. By keeping the case out of public scrutiny, she was ignoring the possibility of further lives being lost to the same type of event, therefore not aligning with deontology or dialogical ethics either, as the ruling cut off public discourse and transparency that would have supported a further ethical conversation. In feminist ethics, this ruling completely ignores empathy and situational context of what had happened. If we use the preceding slide as a scorecard, she did not make the most ethical choice, but her choice was legally justified. She held up the contract on legal precedent, and though everything was procedurally correct, she missed a major opportunity to deliver justice. The positive ramifications are reinforcement of the law and predictability and uniformity in civil litigation, which will prevent unraveling of past cases. The negative ramifications prevented Piccolo from seeking justice for his wife, and she suffered the same reputational damage as Disney in the public's eye, as now the public saw both Disney and the legal system as corrupt. The final actor in this case are the advocacy groups. Once the case was public, allergy groups had to make the call whether to call out Disney and push for legal reform or quietly work in the background and not risk public backlash for attacking a company that is so family-friendly such as Disney. Their options included advocating for Piccolo and his lawsuit, calling for legal accountability, and campaign against hidden arbitration clauses in cases of public safety. Or they could also privately engage with Disney to encourage better food handling and consumer protections, or they could stay silent and not focus on a specific case such as this one. Their decision was to proceed to use the Piccolo case as a catalyst to drive change for greater consumer protection and food allergy awareness. So under these theories, how did the advocacy group fare? In every category, the advocacy groups showed strong alignment in each ethical theory. In utilitarianism, raising awareness and pressuring corporations to adopt ethical practices could protect millions with food allergies. This reduces harm and promotes safety on a large scale, right in line with utilitarianism. They acted when looking through the deontology lens that it was their moral duty to protect the vulnerable and promote justice, to provide dignity and fairness for those who can't speak for themselves, such as Dr. Tangson. The advocacy group is relationship-driven, with their activism centered on the feminist ethics of care and compassion. And in relation to virtue ethics, their actions demonstrate courage, empathy, integrity, and justice, fighting powerful entities, becoming role models in public health, and advocating for more consumer protection. And finally, their work to facilitate ethical dialogue at both community and policy levels fosters dialogical conversations about allergy safety and corporate accountability. So were the most ethical choices made by advocacy groups? Yes, they acted as a moral voice for Dr. Tangson and others afflicted with severe allergies, a vulnerable community that has to be very aware of everything they do. Their work advocating for transparency, safety, and accountability are rooted in empathy and ethics across all theoretical frameworks. So the positive ramifications is the increased awareness of the dangers of hidden allergens. They're advocating for better safety, food handling, food preparation, and also emergency response to food allergies in restaurants. They also are pressuring corporations to rethink their legal overreach. Like, should they be able to hide these clauses in contracts that have nothing to do with the situation at hand? And finally, they empower other families affected by the similar issues. So some of the negative ramifications is they did risk a lot of pushback from others that may have seen them as attacking Disney. Luckily, that didn't seem to happen. But they also might be seen as emotionally driven versus neutral driven. And then also, one of the side effects that they might not think about is they might actually scare people with allergies from going out and enjoying dining out or other things that they enjoy doing because they are worried now that they also could be at great risk. My final thoughts on the case to close out the discussion is I want to make sure that you didn't make a quick decision in your mind that Disney was wrong in their decision to have the lawsuit dismissed. I want, some may view this as corporate greed, lack of taking responsibility, or brand protection, but that's not where I want you to leave how you're thinking about this. The larger issue is that hidden arbitration clause. In this case, the clause was put in a streaming contract that Piccolo agreed to 4 years prior to eating at this Disney restaurant. Should that ever have been used as criteria to dismiss a lawsuit? So, I want you to think, how closely do you read the fine print on these sorts of contracts? no one would logically associate these two events. And I think this is made clear when we apply the tenets of our five ethic theories here of utilitarianism, deontology, feminist ethics, virtue ethics, or dialogical ethics. Almost across the board, Disney's actions were not seen ethical, and they mostly aligned with what Piccolo and the advocacy groups were doing. I believe Disney missed a huge opportunity to take responsibility and show leadership in this case. They damaged their reputation in the process, and they really could have acted with more moral responsibility by allowing the lawsuit to move forward and taking accountability and actually ensuring the public or reassuring the public that they were doing everything they could to make sure this didn't happen again. Here are the two discussion questions I'd like you to ponder after watching my presentation. So, number one, are you in agreement with my assessment that Disney missed an opportunity to act with moral leadership, or would you counter-argue that Disney's actions were justified? And two, should the judicial system be allowed moral imagination when cases may be operating within legal bounds, but clearly have ethical issues? Thank you for watching. After you answer your questions, don't do this before, do it after, and go back and Google the case to see what happened in the next phase. Thank you.